everybody, welcome back to another Blind Tuesdays. Hope you guys have been enjoying the content on the channel as of late. Excuse me, there's just something in my eye and I just cannot get it out, so excuse me if just excuse me picking my eye throughout this review. But yeah, it's just right now I have my thoughts all nice and just there, so I'd rather just shoot the review now versus doing it later where my thoughts are not as completely intact. So for this week, we're doing the 60s, and I said before that I had a film that was already set in place for that, and well, this is not that film. That film was going to be 8½, and I've been trying to watch that film for a while, but I just could never get around to watching it. It's never just a good time, so I just never got around to watching it. So instead, we're going to be doing something different, and this one I had thought of doing, but I was more fascinated to watch 8½, and this I've already have seen, so I had to do a little bit of a refresher before recording this. I'm familiar with just how the film plays, and I remember generally how the film overall acts, but I just needed a little bit of a refresher to understand my feelings about this film. It's a very notable film from the 60s. Alfred Hitchcock, which I don't believe we've ever talked about on this channel. So fitting that this is the first time that we're talking about Alfred Hitchcock. That film that we're going to be talking about is his most notable film, that being Psycho, which was directed by Alfred Hitchcock. I forget if it was written by him, forgive me. Stars Janet Leigh, and Anthony Perkins. Janet Leigh is a character named Marilyn, yeah, and she commits a crime, and she's on the run with a suitcase full of money, and she does it out of, I forget what entirely the reason, but being either through greed or either through just pure selfishness, whatever it was, she desired that case and she got that case. And on her journey away from all of that, from where she has gotten the case and basically again just being on the run, her paranoia starts to get the better of her in a very notable scene where she's driving the car and you see this little smirk come on her face, which kind of gives sort of a dual perspective of whether she's going insane or whether or not something else is at play. But she is on the run with this bag of money, and she comes up to a motel, Bates Motel, a very famous location, and that's where she meets Norman Bates, played by Anthony Perkins, and she settles in for the night and gets to meet Norman Bates and seems off, we'll say. And something happens, very iconic thing happens, and at that point the film decides to take on a completely different direction and focus squarely on Anthony Perkins' character. So that's as far as I'll go without saying anything. I mean, I think anybody who has watched any films knows, of course, about the twist that comes with Psycho. It's a very iconic twist, and I must say that up to that point with Psycho, it is actually very interesting in the construction of the narrative itself, because obviously the great thing about Hitchcock is how he builds tension and what tools he uses in building that tension. In other cases, it can be with sounds. Again, it's been a long time since I've seen that, but I feel that I believe it's North by Northwest. I believe that film's primary usage towards tension, or its tool towards tension, was that of sounds. And with Rear Window, it was a lot to do more with the production itself, a lot with the isolated nature of the characters, the boxed-in sort of scenario, which, by the way, Rear Window, I'd say, is probably my favorite of Hitchcock's that I've seen. But with this, the tool that's at play to build tension is a lot to do with its score, which is very blaring, very bombastic. It pretty much takes priority of each frame or each scene that it occupies. when you're watching each scene, your real focus really is to how the film is just um, music front, how that's playing to the scene. It's not to do with the acting or the aesthetic. It has to do more with that score. It very much takes priority of wherever it is, and the source of the tension comes from the score. And the score is great. It's a really great score. Obviously, another iconic piece from Psycho, and what you get also from it is, again, primarily it's addressing the point before things take a turn. I think the performances are also terrific. I think Janet Leigh is great. I love, again, how her character just descends, but not to where her sanity is just going out the window, but more or less just her whole moral code being tested and seeing on her face that, that change in that perspective from her thinking one way to then that paranoia setting in, and ultimately her whole shape of view of things is rather starting to unravel. And not that of someone who's just lost it, like Anthony Perkins' character, that which we find out later on is descended in a much different way. So compared to Janet Leigh, and to match that, Anthony Perkins, very, very compelling, and to some extent terrifying because of how when we learn more about his character and how Anthony Perkins represents those details, it's very, very interesting and very, very compelling, especially towards the end of the film when everything is laid out to you as to what Anthony Perkins is, his whole, we'll say, psychology, the unveiling of that. It puts his character in a certain light, and those details that we pick up on, those sort of oddness, those sort of, socially removed factors. He seems very distant from everybody, and at the same time just has something on the inside that we're not particularly knowing of. Anthony Perkins, I think, just represents that very, very well. Now, to the point when we get to that iconic scene, the shower scene, when the film decides to make that change. I mean, firstly, it is very bold. It's a very bold thing to do, and I don't think that a lot of storytelling does that nowadays. Even, just, by the standard, by how iconic that shift is. It's interesting to see that a lot of filmmakers don't do that. Usually, the protagonists that we follow at the beginning of the film are the people that we are seeing at the end of the film. So it's very interesting to see, when someone decides almost halfway through their film to spoilers to anyone who has not seen Psycho. I don't know how you haven't or have not heard of it, but Janet Leigh's character gets killed halfway through, and we then change the perspective now to Anthony Perkins' character, or at least we are now following more in the circumstance that is involving Anthony Perkins' character. So, and when we get to that point, like I said, again, a bold direction to take. When we get to that point, I can't help but feel that the film, the storytelling, the tension, everything at that point just doesn't feel as earnest as it was being set up, because at that point, I am fully aware that Anthony Perkins is doing this. It's not the only real mystery to it is that of this dual personality that is represented at the end. The real question at play is, well, what's his deal? We know that he's doing all these things, but it's a matter of just what's happening in his psychosis. What is the definition of his illness? Basically, but that he is doing all these things. That he is the one who killed Janet Leigh in the shower. He's the one who's killing everybody. The film wishes to have sort of a mysterious edge to that, but it doesn't really earn that position. Really earn that with only the first killing of the film being that of a mystery, because we don't know anything about the person. But once we see him commit the act, then we're fully aware as to who he is. So, So it's and the film itself is not really aware as to how much information it supplies to the viewer. So it thinks that there is still something of a mystery at play, and there isn't. You know exactly what's going on. You just haven't figured out the definition, the literal detail as to his illness. What is the thing that is happening with him on a psychological front? It's only until the end that they clarify that it's a dual personality, that he's you know thinking of he's thinking of himself as two different people, that of his mother and that of himself. You know, so it's it just sort of deflates once that twist happens, and it's still interesting. There is good build of tension. There's still great technicalities. Performances are still interesting. There's still things that keep you interested, and though you know what's coming, it still leaves something of an impact, mainly by what's happening in performances and in technicality. But as I mentioned, it is rather knowing. You know where things are going to go because of just how blatant such an iconic moment lends to the film itself, to the story itself. When Anthony Perkins' character Norman Bates, when Norman Bates runs back to the shower, you know it was him. You know it was him. So it's just a matter of just when is the film going to tell me what is happening to him here, because it's not about the exterior. It's not about the actions, the killings. That's already explained. What's not explained yet is what's happening on the inside. What is causing him to do these things? So what's motivating him? That's what's, I think, rather interesting, and that ultimately, when we get to that place at the end, is what causes more fear and more scares towards Anthony Perkins' character, and that performance actually becoming more interesting and more terrifying. So it does benefit, but I feel the optics, the lenses, I feel do not understand how much knowledge that twist, that shift supplies to the viewer. You are very aware as to what Anthony Perkins' character is. I don't think the film knows that fully. So, uh, but thankfully, though, the direction by Hitchcock, his tension, the way that he utilizes that score, the way that he that utilizes those performances, the performances themselves, the production itself. I mean, the very iconic locations with Bates Motel and the house that Norman Bates lives in. It has a simplistic look of things. It's not a film that seems to be made for a lot of money, and within that, though, there is still lots of details. When Norman Bates talks to Janet Leigh's character for the first time, you see like a bunch of owls in the background. You see that one that's like kind of swooping in as if he's now like about to catch his next victim. So it's like there's stuff like that kind of gives the film more packaging of details and to some extent some level of substance, and intrigue, generally speaking, by how it is delivering its story. My only issue is that like I said, I just think that delivery of story at some point is not as self-aware as how it sets things up. Once we get to that twist, I feel as though that it believes that there is still a mystery at play, and there isn't. I mean, there is a mystery only by one question, a clarification, if you may, if that's the way I'll put it. And there's not a mystery of who, it's a mystery of what. So I feel as the movie doesn't understand that. But thankfully, though, there are stuff there that keeps you engaged and keeps you still in a place of uncertainty, even though you are very, very certain as to what is happening. So it just goes to show you that Hitchcock, his strength as a filmmaker, can outweigh issues that he may have on a narrative front or in any other place. And those strengths of those performances as well from Anthony Perkins and Janet Leigh, what we saw at the start. And afterwards with the other performances, they're also good as well. But I wouldn't say it's my favorite of Hitchcock's. I find better films of his, like I've mentioned, Rear Window, North by Northwest. I actually really enjoy The Birds as well. Um, so I think I've seen better work from him, but it's good though. It's a good piece. It's a solid piece, I would actually add, but it wouldn't stack up to other pieces that I've of his. But it's good, but I just feel as though that it's not as self-aware as how it sets itself up. Because then it's sort of um, it's you know exactly. Um, it's like if someone gives you a gift, you know what's inside. You know, it's you know what's inside, um, but like you know the literal thing of what is inside, but it's more or less to do with what it can do. You know, like oh okay I know oh yeah I knew this, but it's like oh okay well what does it do, you know, or what's the thing about it, you know. It's looking past, you know, what it is that you already know and seeing if there's anything else interesting there. And thankfully with Psycho there is, but it has to do more with a detail and not a narrative drive, you know, with something that is driving you to watch that story further. What's driving you further is a lot to do with the technicality and the production itself. And thankfully with Hitchcock, it's always very, very interesting. So so I do enjoy it, but I don't quite love it as much as some other people do. So yeah, so those are my thoughts on Psycho. I like it, but I don't love it. I think there are better films of his. I think Rear Window being my favorite of his. Um, I think just utilizing that production, I think benefited more attention, whereas Psycho's, like I said, is coming more from that score, and I just think that the you know the claustrophobic environment I think benefits more than having to listen to music. So, but you guys let me know your thoughts on Psycho if you guys have seen it. Of course, a very iconic piece, so I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys have seen it. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And this being Blind Tuesdays, obviously, I'm going to spin the wheel on my own time. So whatever the category is going to be for next week, it'll be put right here. And that's going to be for next week's Blind Tuesdays. So there you guys have it. So thank you guys for tuning in. Sorry if I just seem a little out of it. I literally just woke up not too long ago. So excuse me if I just seem a little out of it. But yeah, but you guys let me know your thoughts on Psycho if you guys have seen it. Your thoughts on Alfred Hitchcock and with Anthony Perkins. I know he did the sequel, right? He did Psycho 2, or did he do Psycho 3? Or did he do both? I don't know. I know that he returned to Norman Bates, the role of Norman Bates. And I believe he directed one of the Psycho films, right? You guys let me know. Maybe I'm just not thinking correctly, but yeah, let me know all your thoughts in the comment section below. And that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. And until then, I will catch you guys in the next video.